You're listening to the Mind Over Murder podcast.
My name is Bill Thomas. I'm a writer, consulting producer, and now podcaster. I am now trying to use my experience as the brother of a murder victim to help other victims of violent crime. I'm working on a book on the unsolved Colonial Parkway Murders, and I'm the co-administrator of the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook group together with Kristin Dilley.
My name is Kristin Dilley. I'm a writer, a researcher, a teacher, and a victims advocate, as well as the social media manager and co-administrator for the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook page with my partner in crime, Bill Thomas. Welcome to Mind Over Murder. I'm Kristin Dilley.
And I'm Bill Thomas.
It's season 4, y'all. It's season 4 of Mind Over Murder. Can you believe it?
I'm not sure how that happened, Kristin Dilley.
I have no idea. It's like we blinked and all of a sudden we have 4 seasons of a podcast. This is crazy.
It is. We started Mind Over Murder recording at your kitchen table 3 years ago, right around this time, Christmas time.
Yep.
And that break between Christmas and New Year's, actually, was when we first sat down and recorded maybe 5 episodes over the course
we did the first 5.
3 or 4 or 5 days, something like that. Some of your Christmas vacation, as I recall.
Yes, but I forgave you for it.
Thank you. Most importantly, we have to thank all of you amazing listeners for your support. We are at 3 years. This starts season 4. We just decided to line them up with the years, seeing as how we started in January 2020.
Right before the pandemic times.
That was just before COVID. And as a matter of fact, we have been teased by some other podcasters, because you meet them at conferences and stuff, and also on social media. A lot of people said, they started their podcast during that downtime, and we get to say, we started ours before that. We're pre-COVID.
Yeah, and it was in the works before we started recording. So we knew we were going to do it. It wasn't just something, we didn't just get together and go, you know what? We're bored. We should do a podcast.
Nope. No, it was all part of the plan.
And I don't think either of us ever had the capability of being bored anyway. We're both really busy.
And even now, as we speak, and we're setting up season 4, we've just been talking off the air, as we've been known to do. And we're talking about all the amazing guests we have coming up. I don't want to get into all of that yet. If anything, there is so much to talk about in the true crime space, and we've been extremely fortunate with the people that we've met and who have come onto the podcast, sometimes more than once, to explain things, educate us all. I think you and I started this thing to listen and learn, and hopefully we continue to do both those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we can't thank our listeners enough for all your support, your questions, your messages, your good wishes, showing up at events, asking for autographs, which is still a little weird, but it's fun too. And we really also, too, I don't want to neglect all of our guests who's come on, because we have had such a bounty of amazingly talented and wonderful people who have agreed without a hitch. Hey, yeah, I'd love to come on your pod. I don't think we've ever had anybody turn us down.
I don't think we have either. Sometimes there's a scheduling challenge when you're talking to busy people and trying to fit into their lives. I don't think anybody's ever turned us down.
No, and just looking at the roster the other day of all the people that we've had on, it's been like, whoa. We know some really amazing, generous people who are wonderful with their time and their intelligence and their knowledge. So we just can't thank them enough. We wouldn't have this podcast without our guests.
There are still people that are on a wish list, if you will, which is a rolling group of people that we'd like to get on the podcast and keep trying. And sometimes it's a matter of the right introduction. Maybe it's the right pitch or whatever, but we've been incredibly fortunate, and we're going to keep working on the wish list, and hopefully we'll get all those people in 2023 for season 4.
Maybe we should have people guess who's the top 3 on our wish list.
Yeah, but then that just adds more pressure on us to get those guests.
Yeah, that is true. And at least for me, there's always a revolving spot in the top 3.
This is true. So, on to more serious topics, perhaps?
Yes. As of this recording date, which is Sunday, the 8th of January?
Yes.
Is that the day we're on?
Would be accurate.
I'm still in that I don't know what day it is hangover from Christmas break. So as of this recording, which is Sunday, January 8th, we are 2 days away from a very sad and tragic event that happened here in the Tidewater area of Virginia, and that was a shooting at a local elementary school, Rich Neck Elementary School, of a first grade teacher by a 6-year-old student. And that is something that we put up on our social media pages, but it did also hit the national news, which is not something that any school district ever wants. We did want to take a moment and just extend our best wishes and our hopes for a speedy recovery to that teacher out of respect for her family and her privacy. I will not be naming her. She is a friend of a friend. So I do feel a connection to this person and the terrible events that have unfolded here. Rich Neck Elementary is not too terribly far away from where I teach. And as an educator, every time I hear about a school shooting, it makes my heart drop into my stomach. So we just wanted to take a moment here at Mind Over Murder to extend our best wishes and our thoughts for a speedy recovery for that teacher and the hopes that nothing like this will happen in our area again.
We were talking about the ripple effect of something like this. And we've talked about this before on Mind Over Murder, and where I've likened a situation like this to dropping a stone or a pebble in the water. And the ripple effect from the center, this 6-year-old student somehow gets a hold of a gun, and this little boy comes to school and shoots his 28-year-old teacher, and she ends up in critical condition. And when I first read the story, Kristin, I misunderstood something. Somehow, in my mind, picturing it, I thought the student and the teacher were alone, like going over something or whatever. And then you just told me that there were a bunch of other kids in the classroom.
Yeah, no, my understanding is that this did happen in a classroom during class, and that after she had been shot, she still yelled for the rest of her class to run, to flee out of the room. For that, in a lot of publications and TV coverage, she's being hailed as a hero, and I fully believe that 100%. It's just unfathomable that something like this can happen.
And that ripple effect that we talked about, it just seems to me that this little kid, who's a little kid, this isn't some 25-year-old, this is a 6-year-old first grader. For that little kid and that teacher who was expected to survive, when you started telling me about the other kids in the classroom, and then every kid in that school, every teacher in that school, every teacher in the school system, quite frankly, this story got such national news, probably every teacher like yourself across the country shuddered a bit thinking about this. And then there's the parents at that school and every other school. The ripple effects of something like this just go on and on. Hopefully more will come out. I'm left with this just baffling question. How does a first grader get a hold of a loaded gun?
Yeah.
And then it starts from there.
Yeah. And to be honest, I'm not sure how much more is going to come out about that. I know that the media, I'm sure, will try to dig everything up that they can. The police chief was very good from the beginning in filling people in about what had happened. I do think it's important for anybody who hasn't seen the coverage to understand that this was not an accidental shooting. And the police chief laid that out, I think, very quickly and said this was not an accident. This was purposeful. And that, I think, is one of the things that makes me shudder as well. But it was the sort of chaos that was unfolding on TV and over social media that you never want to associate with a school anywhere near you. But we've seen it so many times. Parents streaming to the school, trying to find their kids crying as they're being reunited with parents. It's the sort of thing that we've seen over and over with every school shooting, and you just hope that you're never going to see it in your own community. But there it was. And it's not the only shooting that has taken place at high schools in this area over the last couple of years. There's been 3, 2 last year and this one. And I know there are a lot of local parents who are very rightfully asking, what can we do? Is it metal detectors that need to be put in? I don't want to speculate on that. The school district has their own line of thought on that reasoning. I hate the fact that it's happened. I do worry about it as an educator. Unfortunately, it feels like there's nothing that you can do other than just walk into the building and hope that you're going to be safe every single day.
And today is not that day. That can't be a good feeling.
I would be lying if I said that it hasn't been on my mind the last couple of days. It has been. And I know that when I go into school tomorrow morning, it will be on my mind as well. It's just the sort of thing that I internalize. But I want to extend just my good thoughts to this very brave teacher who always had her students on her mind foremost. Even in the midst of what I'm sure was absolutely agonizing physical pain, she still yelled for her kids to run and get out of the room. And she is a hero for that. We here at Mind Over Murder are extending our best wishes, and we hope that if there's anything we can do in any way, she or her family will let us know.
There's been so much going on in the true crime space, we almost don't know where to start.
I know, it's been so busy.
But we thought we might start with the case that seems to be on everyone's mind these days, which is the Idaho 4 murders.
It's so funny. This is the case that even my parents and friends and people who are not true crimey, they're paying very close attention to. My parents are not at all. They're supportive of my podcast. They know that I am true crimey in their words.
Did they really say that?
True crimey. But I know it's a little bewildering to them at times, but even they have been like, okay, what do you know? Can you tell us more? What's going on? What's a probable cause affidavit? Can you tell us? Of course, that's when I'm happy to get into lecture mode and be like, well, here's what it means. But yeah, it seems like everybody is just fascinated with this case.
One of the things that I've gotten a kick out of is how many different misspellings I've seen of the word affidavit.
Yes.
Even to the point where it turned into kind of a joke on social media where people were calling it an Alpha David. And then they began behaving as if that actually was the word. It's not that complicated, and most of us have spell check on the devices that we use. So there was an affidavit filed when the suspect, Bryan Kohberger, was returned from Pennsylvania, where he had been arrested by state police and FBI agents. After he was returned back to Idaho, where the murder took place, and we'll get into more details in just a second, then the affidavit, properly spelled, was released. It's a 19-page document. It's well written, and it's actually fairly easy to read, and we'll actually go through it with you. One thing I need to emphasize, I've mentioned this on social media, and people need to understand this. The affidavit is just a brief snapshot of some of the evidence that has been uncovered by Moscow Police Department, Idaho State Police, and FBI agents working together as a team. It is not everything. And this is something that has just made me crazy. People are like, they didn't have this, and they don't have that, and they don't have this. This is just a snapshot. Remember, there's a strategy in creating a document. This is a legal charging document. It is not designed to be chapter and verse. And the strategy I'm mentioning is prosecutors are not going to hand potential defense attorneys everything they've got right from the beginning of a case. Right. There's going to be a lot more information that's going to come out. I'm assuming for a second that this case will go to trial. Once additional information is released, you will see that law enforcement has a lot more than what in this affidavit.
I want to make sure that we take a minute and just echo the sentiments of those of our friends who have gone on all of the various TV and news programs here. And it feels, honestly, Bill, like we know so many people who have been on TV talking about this case. I'm trying to follow, okay, Bobby's on this at this time, and Jim's at this time, and Maureen's here at this time, and Mac's here at this other time. And I can't follow all of them, but luckily they have been very diligent in posting links to their particular appearances. But every single one of them has agreed on one thing, and that is this is a beautiful piece of police work from the Moscow PD. This is, as you said, it's easy to follow. It's well put together. It's a solid case, like just based on this, and that's not all of the case, but it is a solid case. And for everybody out there who initially, in the early days of the investigation, was derisive of the Moscow Police Department and saying, oh, they're moving too slow, they don't have enough, they're not really good at this investigative thing. Oh, yes, they were. And this proves it. They did an absolutely excellent job in cooperation with their law enforcement partners. And so reading this affidavit the first time around, I read through it a couple of times. all I could think was, this is a great piece of policing. Mac was the first person who said that, but everyone else, to my knowledge, Mac was the first person who said that, at least within my hearing, and everyone else agrees too. This is excellent.
One of the first and smartest moves that the Moscow Police Department made was they recognized that they're a small department. They have 35 total staff. When you've got 35 officers and covering a college town, this isn't a place where murder investigations, particularly complicated murder investigations, typically take place. As a matter of fact, they said there hadn't been a murder in Moscow, I think, in 7 years, something like that.
Yeah.
So this is a relatively small town in Idaho. They're mostly focused on other things. Law enforcement has a job to do, but murder investigations aren't typically on the to-do list for the Moscow PD. One of the first things they did, which I think was very smart on their part, was they immediately reached out to their partners. They asked the Idaho State Police and their very well-respected forensics team to step in. And they asked the Federal Bureau of Investigation and their highly respected forensics people to step in. So they knew they were looking at a very complicated case. They knew it was likely going to go interstate because they're right at the corner of Washington State. As it turns out, the suspect, once he was identified, was from Pullman, Washington, which is right across the border. And I've not been to these two places, but my understanding is they're essentially immediately adjacent, two different college towns, and people go back and forth a significant amount of the time. Moscow PD and their chief immediately realized we need a lot more resources than we've got in our small professional staff here. What I'd like to do is read a little bit, and then we'll get into a little bit of commentary and analysis. Understand that we're not experts on all things law enforcement, although we have a lot of friends that are.
Yeah, we do.
And we've learned a lot. I'll start if it's okay. It's dated December 29th, and it starts off Exhibit A, Statement of Brett Payne. The below information is provided by Brett Payne, who is a duly appointed, qualified, and acting peace officer within the county of Latah, I'm going to say.
Latah.
State of Idaho. Brett Payne is employed by the Moscow Police Department in the official capacity or position of corporal and has been a trained and qualified peace officer for approximately 4 years. Corporal Payne is being assisted by members of the Idaho State Police and agents of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. On November 13th, 2022, at approximately 4 p.m., so this is the afternoon after the murders have taken place, Moscow Police Department Sergeant Blaker and I responded to 1122 King Road, Moscow, Idaho, hereinafter the King Road residence, to assist with scene security and the processing of a crime scene associated with 4 homicides. Upon our arrival, the Idaho State Police ISP forensic team was on scene and was preparing to begin processing the scene. MPD Officer Smith, one of the initial responding officers to the incident, advised he would walk me through the scene. So first, real important, Moscow recognizes they have limitations in terms of their forensic capabilities. Before they go in to process the scene, they've already reached out to their law enforcement partners with the Idaho State Police, and they're on scene before they go in. So there's no mistakes. One of the things that our friend Cheryl McCollum has said, and we'll be talking with Cheryl in the next couple of weeks, Mac said she thought they did an outstanding job right from the beginning, and this is one of those examples.
If you think about a case like the JonBenet Ramsey case, Boulder police refused to accept any outside help immediately. And that's one of the reasons why the case has not been solved for so many years. I think Moscow PD, knowing their limitations and calling in experts immediately, was the best move that they could have made.
And here it is 30 plus years later, and in the Colonial Parkway murders, we had botched investigative steps when National Park Service rangers, who were not terribly well trained in law enforcement techniques, they did a number of things in the Colonial Parkway murders crime scenes, particularly in the car that belonged to Keith Call. And this would have been the car that Keith Call and Cassandra Haley were traveling in, the Toyota Celica. That was a botched crime scene, still paying for that 30 plus years later. Back to the affidavit. Officer Smith and I entered the King Road residence through the bottom floor door on the north side of the building. Officer Smith and I then walked upstairs to the second floor. Now, Smith is showing this officer around to walk him through the crime scene as carefully as possible. Officer Smith directed me down the hallway to the west bedroom on the second floor, which I later learned through Xana's driver's license and other personal belongings found in the room was Xana Kernodle's, hereinafter referred to as the Kernodle room. Just before this room, there was a bathroom door on the south wall of the hallway. As I approached the room, I could see a body, later identified as Kernodle's, laying on the floor. Kernodle was deceased with wounds which appeared to have been caused by an edged weapon. Also in the room was a male, later identified as Ethan Chapin. Chapin was also deceased with wounds later determined via the autopsy report provided by Spokane County Medical Examiner, dated December 15th, 2022, to be caused by sharp force injuries. Notice here again the interagency cooperation. This is Spokane County in Washington assisting on the medical examination.
I then followed Officer Smith upstairs to the third floor of the residence. The third floor consisted of 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. The bedroom on the west side of the floor was later determined to be Kaylee Goncalves, hereafter Goncalves' room. I later learned from review of Officer Nunez's body camera, there was a dog in the room when Moscow PD initially responded. The dog belonged to Goncalves and her ex-boyfriend, Jack, it looks like Ducour. I found out from my interview with Jack Ducour on November 13th, 2022, that he and Goncalves shared the dog. Officer Smith then pointed out a small bathroom on the east side of the third floor. This bathroom shared a wall with Madison Mogan's, hereafter Mogan's bedroom, which was situated on the southeast corner of the third floor. As I entered this bedroom, I could see 2 females in the single bed in the room. Both Goncalves and Mogan were deceased with visible stab wounds. I also later noticed what appeared to be a tan leather knife sheath laying on the bed next to Mogan's right side when viewed from the door. The sheath was later processed and had K-Bar USMC and the United States Marine Corps Eagle, Globe, and Anchor insignia stamped on the outside of it. The Idaho State Lab later located a single source of male DNA, suspect profile, left on the button snap of the knife sheath. This is where I immediately and initially was like, okay, this guy is not the criminal mastermind that other people are assuming he is. How do you lose control of your knife sheath with your DNA on it if you're being the careful master criminologist that everyone was wondering, is this guy going to be able to get away with it? He was studying criminology. Not if you lost your knife sheath.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing that's real important to emphasize here, everybody has gotten very hepped up on social media about this apparent touch DNA on the button of the knife sheath. And then everybody's saying they only have a single source of DNA. No one ever said they only had a single source of DNA. As we talked about a minute ago, a document like this is a summary of what the charging agency, in this case law enforcement, it hasn't been handed over to prosecutors yet, needs to reveal at a most basic level about what they have found in their investigation so far. They don't need to put in everything. So, for example, there could be additional DNA evidence in this residence or found elsewhere. For instance, Bryan Kohberger's car and other locations, including his house, apartment, and his office at the university. And there could be other locations. Just because they're not mentioned doesn't mean they don't exist. And I have seen hundreds of comments on social media about they only have a single source of DNA. It doesn't say that. All it says is we got DNA from the button of the sheath. And as you said, not exactly a criminal mastermind. He left this apparently on the bed or just next to 2 of his victims. So we may discuss the fact that this guy is supposed to be some sort of criminal genius. I don't think so. You're listening to Mind Over Murder. We'll be right back after this word from our sponsors. We're back here at Mind Over Murder. Real important that you understand that when people are stabbed, and this is someone who has stabbed 4 different people with apparently this same knife, and again, I'm making an assumption, but let's just go with it for a second. There's a real good chance that he may have cut himself. As we've talked about before on the podcast, without getting too graphic, blood is very slippery. If you're stabbing 4 different people repeatedly, you could easily slip and cut yourself with your cutting hand or your other hand, and you're struggling with real live human beings. Some of them may have been asleep. Some of them may have been drinking or drugging that night. They might not have all put up a fight, but apparently from the descriptions we read so far, some of them did. There's a very good chance there may be other exchanges of evidence, DNA and other potential sources of bodily fluids that could be steering law enforcement back to a particular suspect.
Exactly. Maureen O'Connell, who appeared on the Lover's Lane murders with us, appeared on the Best Case, Worst Case podcast with our friend Jim Clementi and Francie Hakes. And she said that her understanding was that it was an evidence-rich crime scene. And Maureen, as a member of the FBI's evidence response team, is here with scenes like this. And she did say, along with Jim Fitzgerald, who also appeared on the podcast with her, that it is highly unlikely that it was there's just one source of DNA in the room. She said the very same thing. When you are doing up close and personal wet work like this, it is very likely that the guy injured himself, which is why during those pretext stops heading across the country, the FBI stopped Kohberger and his father at least twice. And one of the reasons apparently was to get a look at his hands. Had he injured himself? Were there visible healing wounds or scars or anything like that on his hands? Yeah, I totally agree, Bill, that, just because only one source of DNA is mentioned in the cause affidavit, that does not mean that is all there is.
Let the record show I'm actually shaking my head and rolling my eyes because I can't believe how many people I've seen on Facebook and other social media platforms insisting that there's only a single source of DNA.
As part of the investigation, numerous interviews were conducted by Moscow Police Department officers, Idaho State Police detectives, and FBI agents. 2 of the interviews included BF and DM. These are the roommates. Both BF and DM were inside the Kings Road residence at the time of the homicides and were roommates to the victims. BF's bedroom was located on the east side of the first floor of the Kings Road residence. Based on numerous interviews conducted by MPD officers, ISP detectives, and FBI agents, as well as my review of evidence, I have learned the following. On the evening of November 12th, 2022, Chapin and Kernoodle are seen by BF at the Sigma Chi House on the University of Idaho campus at 735 Napers Drive from approximately 9 p.m. on November 12th to 1:45 a.m. on November 13th. BF also estimated that at approximately 1:45 a.m., Chapin and Kernoodle returned to the King Road residence. BF also stated that Chapin did not live in the King Road residence, but was a guest of Kernoodle.
Now, my understanding from what I've read is there's a big football game that night. A lot of partying, a lot of drinking. Almost everyone in the group is out at various events. So I think there's a lot of alcohol consumed, and most everybody returns to the house, as Kristin will walk you through in a moment. And I'm attaching no judgment to this. These are college students doing college student stuff, which may include consumption of far too much alcohol and drugs as well. So people are drunk and high, and they're all heading back to this shared rental house.
Goncalves and Mogan were at a local bar, the Corner Club at 202 North Main Street in Moscow. Goncalves and Mogan can be seen on video footage provided by the Corner Club between 10 p.m. and 1:30 a.m. on November 13th. At approximately 1:30 a.m., Goncalves and Mogan can be seen on video at a local food vendor called the Grub Truck at 318 South Main in downtown Moscow. The grub truck live streams video from their food truck on the streaming platform Twitch, which is available for public viewing on their website. This video was captured by law enforcement. A private party, name redacted, reported that he provided a ride to Goncalves and Mogan at approximately 1:56 a.m. from downtown Moscow in front of the grub truck to the King Road residence.
This private party, I'm sure this will come out. I'm not sure whether this is actually a Lyft or Uber driver or somebody else, hopefully not drunk, who drove them home. People have gotten very hung up on this as well. I'm sure it will come out at a trial, if any, who this private party was who drove the two women home. I also got a kick out of the fact that, and I saw the live streams on social media, that a food truck has a live stream of the people hanging out at their food truck. I just think the whole thing is so college town. It's amusing.
DM and BF both made statements during interviews that indicated the occupants of the King Road residence were at home by 2 a.m. and asleep or at least in their rooms by approximately 4 a.m. This is with the exception of Kernoodle, who received a DoorDash order at the residence at approximately 4 a.m. Law enforcement identified the DoorDash delivery driver who reported this information. The adult in me who has to get up at 4:30 in the morning is going, my gosh, what are you doing up at 4?
This is college students. Yeah. And we're not laughing about what transpires next, but these kids are having a good time. And as I understand it, this was a long-time rental house with different roommates, lots of people coming and going, a lot of partying. Law enforcement had been to the home at different times for noisy parties and that kind of thing. It's a party house. There's no question about it. And I love the fact that everybody's home by 2, but some of them are still up at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, you can tell it's been 20 years since I was in college. It's making my head hurt to think about being awake at 4.
Yeah.
This next part really rightfully, I think, is very chilling and disturbing. And a lot of it has been made on social media. Let's go through it. And then I think we can talk a little bit about what came out here in this affidavit. DM stated she originally went to sleep in her bedroom on the southeast side of the second floor. DM stated she was awoken at approximately 4 a.m. by what she stated sounded like Goncalves playing with her dog in one of the upstairs bedrooms, which were located on the 3rd floor. A short time later, DM said she heard who she thought was Goncalves saying something to the effect of, "There's someone here." A review of records obtained from a forensic download of Kernoodle's phone showed this could also have been Kernoodle, as her cellular phone indicated she was likely awake and using the TikTok app at approximately 4:12 a.m.
I found that there's someone here very disturbing in that it could be Ms. Goncalves saying there's someone here, as in there's an intruder, there's a suspect. It occurred to me much later, though, that we could also be hearing a reference to the fact that this DoorDash driver dropping off the food, he could represent there's someone here. This "there's someone here" comment, some of this stuff is being heard down the hall, on different floors, through the walls. My first thought was there's someone here is the suspect, but I could be wrong about that. And these are the kind of details that I think will come out later.
DM stated she looked out of her bedroom but did not see anything when she heard the comment about someone being in the house. DM stated she opened her door a second time when she heard what she thought was crying coming from Kernoodle's room. DM then said she heard a male voice say something to the effect of, "It's okay, I'm going to help." I'm sorry, that's terrifying to me.
I know, it is very hard to read this. There's crying, although as some people have pointed out, in college, late at night, people have been drinking. There's drama and heartbreak in every college student's life at different times. It's not that out of the ordinary. However, when you start to see the cumulative effect of all of these notes, and then when we get to "it's okay, I'm going to help you," and you think to yourself, is that one of the survivors or someone who has not yet been attacked saying, "It's okay, I'm going to help you"? Or is this the suspect saying it? It's just too awful for words.
Yeah. At approximately 4:17 a.m., a security camera located at 1112 King Road, a residence immediately to the northwest of 1122 King Road, picked up distorted audio of what sounded like voices or a whimper, followed by a loud thud. A dog can also be heard barking numerous times, starting at 4:17 a.m. The security camera is less than 50 feet from the west wall of Kernodle's bedroom. DM stated she opened her door for the third time after she heard the crying and saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose walking toward her. DM described the figure as 5'10" or taller, male, not very muscular, but athletically built with bushy eyebrows. The male walked past DM as she stood in a, quote, frozen shock phase. The male walked toward the back sliding door. DM locked herself in her room after seeing the male. DM did not state that she recognized the male. This leads investigators to believe that the murderer left the scene.
There's so much to unpack here. There's been a tremendous amount of criticism of this roommate for seeing what we think is the suspect and then not reporting it. Now, keep in mind, this is a house where people come and go. There's a lot of partying. There's boyfriends and girlfriends. There's hookups. Stuff goes on there. I don't think we can criticize this roommate for seeing this man and not immediately calling 911. In retrospect, which is always hindsight 2020 and all of that, yes, she's probably seen the murderer leaving the premises, but she doesn't know that at this point. And as we talked about a minute ago, there's a lot of drinking and probably some drugging going on that night. There's a very strong possibility this young woman is seriously impaired. She may be drunk or high or both. She sees this person walk by. I've seen a lot of assumptions on social media that he saw her and somehow spared her. I think it's quite possible in a darkened hallway that she saw him and he didn't see her. I might even argue that if this is the suspect and he has now just killed 4 people upstairs, he may be in a state of shock himself.
Hyper-focused on getting out.
Yeah, and they talk about that you almost get like tunnel vision. Remember now, he has killed 4 people, regardless of whether his original objective was to kill 1 person, 2, 3, or 4. He has now attacked and likely murdered 4 people. His flight escape endorphins are just raging. He is now trying to get out of that house as quickly as possible. When you look at the timeline, this is all very compressed. I do think it is quite possible, and a number of experts who know far more about this than we do have said that it is completely possible for him to kill 4 people in a fairly compact period of time. But he wants out at this point, and so it's quite possible he walked past DM and never even saw her, or he may be done killing. In other words, he came to do something. He has completed his mission, if you will, and now he's on his way out, and maybe he's done killing or doesn't even see her. Or as you said, Kristin, he's so focused on the escape route that he might not even see her standing there in a darkened doorway.
Look, and I think it's also really important to point out that we do not know until we are in a given circumstance how we're going to react. It's just human nature can be very unpredictable. And so talking about this to a friend, we were having a friendly argument the other day, and I pointed out the time that someone tried to break into my house through my bedroom window. What should I have done? I should have called the police immediately. What did I do? I grabbed a baseball bat and I went after the guy. Should I have done that? No.
Probably
Did I know
not.
I was going to? Probably not. Did I know that I was going to do it? Absolutely not. I had no idea that I was going to do that. I always figured that if something like that was going to happen, I would go to my bathroom, lock the door, call the police. What did I do instead? I grabbed my baseball bat and ran out screaming like an idiot. And I had no plan to do that whatsoever. I keep the baseball bat under my bed just in case something like that happens. But did I actually plan on grabbing it and running out screaming like a banshee? Nope. But I did it.
This woman This young woman who is probably impaired peeks out of her room, I think for the third time. She's heard odd noises, but again, you can put it all together afterward. But while you're hearing bits and pieces on a party night with your roommates and visitors, you're not necessarily thinking I'm listening to a murder. You're thinking you hear the dog upstairs. Yeah. And you think it's your roommate playing with the dog, and then people are saying some things, but out of context. There's someone here. There's somebody here. Or it's okay, I'm going to help you. Those are fairly innocuous comments late in the evening when a group of students have been out having a really good time. Yeah. We just never know how we're going to react in any given situation. We don't know how to contextualize what we've heard necessarily. I think that everybody who's being super, super hard on DM on social media, and we've both seen it, just step back for a minute, take into consideration that if it was you in that situation, you have no idea how you would react or respond. And so I think we need to give her a little bit of grace and understand that she's probably going through a terribly awful time right at the moment, too, just dealing with the fact that 4 of her roommates were murdered. I don't think that we lose anything by giving someone a little bit of grace in a situation like this. I'm hoping that the people who are rabidly attacking her on social media will ease up for a little bit and just think a little bit about how you would feel if you were in that situation. I would urge everybody to let this case unfold. If the prosecution is able to build the kind of case that we're anticipating, I believe they will be able to show beyond a reasonable doubt that the suspect is responsible for these 4 murders, and will be able to lay out a story for us that makes sense with all of the available evidence, of which there's a lot more than what we've heard about. Yeah. And just think, blaming DM for failures in retrospect is beyond unfair. And as you've said, she's lost 4 friends. She is going to be forever scarred and associated with this case. Blaming her for being a witness to a crime, but not completely understanding that had just happened, is absurd in the extreme. I think we all need to take a step back, let the story unfold, let law enforcement and the prosecutors do their work. I think we'll come to understand how this situation unfolded. You don't have to like what DM did. And as you said, that night that someone was breaking into your house, you should have called 911. You running off into the night with a baseball bat in your hand, you responded aggressively that night. And I'm not criticizing you.
My boyfriend gave me hell over, as he probably should have. I shouldn't have done that, but I had no idea.
The concern, of course, would be that you might be facing off very shortly after running outside with someone who might have a weapon. Yeah. Could be substantially larger or stronger than you are. I know you can take care of yourself, but he might have been larger than you were. He could have been, again, operating in some sort of altered state from chemical ingestion or whatever, and he could have hurt you. So was it a brilliant move for you to run off into the night with a baseball bat?
No.
Maybe not, in retrospect, but you responded in the way that you did. There's that fight or flight thing that happens. Yes. There's also a situation where, as happened with DM, it would appear, she was frozen in fear, I think was how she put it to law enforcement investigators. That's legitimate too.
The combination of DM's statements to law enforcement, reviews of forensic downloads of records from BF and DM's phone, and video of a suspect video as described below leads investigators to believe the homicide occurred between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. And again, as you pointed out, Bill, that's a very compressed timeline. They've really got a lot here. During the processing of the crime scene, investigators found a latent shoe print. This was located during the second processing of the crime scene by the ISP forensic team by first using a presumptive blood test and then amino black, a protein stain that detects the presence of cellular material. The detected shoe print showed a diamond-shaped pattern similar to the pattern of a Vans-type shoe sole just outside the door of DM's bedroom, located on second floor. This is consistent with DM's statement regarding the suspect's path of travel.
Again, if I can comment about the shoe print, This is what's mentioned in the affidavit. This doesn't mean this is all the evidence that law enforcement has. I cannot say this enough. It's quite possible that there are other shoe prints and evidence that has been left behind by the suspect. They're just mentioning one thing, not everything. So this may not be a definitive list of all of the evidence that they have. It's quite possible 4 people have been murdered by this point, we believe, in what has been described as a very bloody and evidence-rich crime scene. It's quite possible there's additional evidence that's been left behind by this suspect. So again, I see people going absolutely bonkers about the Vans shoe and how common they are. And there could be a lot more evidence here. I think those of us that have rushed to judgment need to take a step back and just let this case unfold. They're giving you a snapshot. It's not necessarily every picture in the roll.
Yeah, absolutely. As part of the investigation, an extensive search, commonly referred to in law enforcement as a video canvass, was conducted in the area of the King Road residence. This video canvass was to obtain any footage from the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022, in the area of the King Road residence and surrounding neighborhoods in an effort to locate the suspect or suspect vehicle traveling to or leaving from the King Road residence. This video canvass resulted in the collection of numerous surveillance videos in the area from both residential and business addresses. I have reviewed numerous videos that were collected and have had conversations with the other MPD officers, ISP detectives, and FBI agents that are similarly reviewing footage that was obtained. In our next episode, we're going to talk about the contents of that video canvass, including spottings of the suspect vehicle. We'll also get into some of the cell phone evidence, and then we'll talk about the suspect, Bryan Kohberger himself. Bill, any final thoughts before we wrap for today?
No, I look forward to the next part of the conversation.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for this episode of Mind Over Murder. We will continue with our discussion of the Idaho 4 case in our next episode. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.
Mind Over Murder is a production of Absolute Zero and Another Dog Productions.
Our executive producers are Bill Thomas and Kristin Dilley.
Our logo art is by Pamela Arnois.
Our theme music is by Kevin MacLeod.
Mind Over Murder is distributed in partnership with Crawl Space Media.
You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
You can also follow our page on the Colonial Parkway Murders on Facebook.
And finally, you can follow Bill Thomas on Twitter at BillThomas56.
Thank you for listening to Mind Over Murder.